B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Friday, March 22nd, 2019. Trump has done it again. Another giveaway to the state of Israel, promoting Benjamin Netanyahu's re-election. This time, recognition of Israel's 50-year-old theft of the Golan Heights. And Syria is in no position presently to contest it. This is another giveaway, and let me be fair, Barack Obama staged the last big giveaway to Israel before Trump took over by increasing the annual money that we pay to Israel. It's called a defense subsidy, and he didn't get anything in return. So Trump comes to office amid charges that he is captive to a foreign nation, and that's always Russia, right? But in fact, he has, you can check off, and we will in a moment, the list of favors that Israel has demanded of the Trump administration, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, pulling out of the Iran Accord, and now recognizing the Golan Heights. And just as with Ukraine, there is a practical part of me that says, well, yes, Russia grabbed Crimea, and they're not going to give it back. And sanctions and all kinds of hand-wringing won't really change that reality. And it's true that Israel has had de facto control of the Golan Heights. They've been busy building settlements there for 50 years. So in some ways, Trump is simply recognizing reality. But the timing of this, and the ignorance of history, and UN resolutions that flatly say that this is an illegal land grab by Israel, those all get thrown out the window. And once again, Benjamin Netanyahu comes to campaign for re-election in Washington this coming week. Monday, White House meeting. Somewhere in there, Monday night or Tuesday, will be his annual speech to AIPAC. Then he gets a dinner. I don't think it's called a state dinner, but he gets dinner at the White House with Trump. All of this staged to support his re-election, which is just weeks away. And in reading the accounts of this giveaway of the Golan Heights, I'm looking right now at a New York Times report that talks about how Syria has routinely demanded the return of the Golan Heights and tried to stage peace talks with Israel in order to negotiate that outcome. And here's the language of the Times. Those talks never took off. And in 2011, a civil war erupted in Syria that would destroy the country and reshape the regional order. Notice anything missing from that recap? That civil war didn't just erupt. The U.S. CIA stoked that civil war and turned it into a 90 or 90-way conflict with all the outside interests, the proxy forces from Saudi Arabia to the Emirates to Turkey, and good old Al-Qaeda, and good old the Islamic State. And the only person I've recently heard tell the truth about the origins of the Syria conflict is Tulsi Gabbard. And she gets denounced routinely because she took a meeting with Bashar Assad when she visited Syria a couple of years ago. And so, if this is a prelude to the Jared Kushner, Crown Prince Jared's peace plan, oh, that's even going to be uglier than I had anticipated. There are about 50,000 people who live in the Golan Heights. Roughly half are Arabs. The Jewish population with settlements, wineries, orchards, even a ski resort, about 26,000 people. One of the best commentaries I've seen on this tweeted initiative by the Trump administration is from Robert Mackey at The Intercept. He says that this sudden decision by Trump timed to the election, he says, offered without explanation, the move looked to many Israeli, Palestinian, and American observers like a transparent attempt to boost the re-election prospects of Trump's embattled ally, Netanyahu. Do you think? Remember Mohammed el-Baradei, the Egyptian former head of the International Atomic Energy Agency? He tweeted back at Trump to consult with your international lawyers, referring, of course, to the 1967 unanimously adopted UN Security Council resolution, which called for the withdrawal of Israeli armed forces from territories occupied in the 1967 war. This also drew outrage from Russia and from Iran and, of course, from Syria. But this will be ignored because of the arrogance that is shared between Trump and Netanyahu. They even dispatched Mike Pompeo to be in Israel for the announcement. And what we see here, in very sharp relief, is that the Trump administration does the bidding of the government of the State of Israel, the radical, extreme, apartheid government of Benjamin Netanyahu, and seeks to support his re-election. And, of course, there's not very much pushback, because after Ilhan Omar's remarks and that no-hate resolution in Congress, nobody can speak up and say, hey, wait a minute, Israel has too much influence on the American government. We do too much that aids their interests and not our own. No, you're not going to hear anything like that. And keep in mind that in the Golan Heights, the April 9th election, 90% of the Arabs in that area have declined to take Israeli citizenship because they object to being occupied by Israel, and therefore they will not be voting for or against Netanyahu. And so this is another ugly power grab, just like our false recognition of the Guaido government. It's not a government. The would-be government in Venezuela. Trump is just going willy-nilly, saying, yeah, and you know, this is not so outrageous to suggest. Next, will he just grab part of the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt and say, you know, Israel will handle it better? I mean, these are not rational. These are not well thought out. They don't observe the process of international relations. And I find it obscene. And in advance of Bibi's arrival, Trump is repeating claims that he made a couple of weeks ago. Quote, the Democrats have very much proven to be anti-Israel. So he's trying to sow division among Americans. He's trying to peel off Jews from the Democratic Party and get them to move into the Republican column. And then he goes from the political to the weaponized term that is used by the Israel lobby in this country to marginalize its opponents. There's no question about that. It's a disgrace. I mean, I don't know what's happened to them, but they're totally anti-Israel. And frankly, I think they're anti-Jewish. Now, it's just one little slippery slope from anti-Jewish to anti-Semitic. And false claims of anti-Semitism abound in this country today, even when you compare them to actual acts of anti-Semitism that occur. Reacting, the Jewish Democratic Council said Trump should stop lying about Democrats and Israel and said Jews should not be treated as political pawns. Meanwhile, related to Syria, both Trump and Sarah Huckabee Sanders have announced today that the Islamic State is over and that essentially the war in Syria, therefore, is over. And, of course, this is a premature ejaculation again. I do recognize that most of the territory that had been held by the Islamic State is no longer theirs. But there's still thorny issues related to Turkey, the Kurds, the fighters that we have supported and that we are willing to consign to atrocities by Turkey as Trump tries to get out of Syria. And as you know, I don't believe the U.S. ever belonged in Syria, and I don't object to his efforts to withdraw the limited forces we say we have there. But Trump has lost that struggle to the Pentagon and the deep state. We're learning that the Kushner brothers, Crown Prince Jared and his little brother Josh, who runs Thrive Capital, did a tag team visit to Saudi Arabia recently. The younger brother, Josh, headed into Saudi Arabia when Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was holding his little investment party. And then Jared came in, apparently as Josh was flying out. And this is the kind of seedy and sordid grifting. That's the best way to describe it. And it is emblematic of the Trump administration. In any other case, we would all be outraged. There would be investigations. Jared Kushner would have to leave the government. But we have become inured to the level of corruption that is represented by the Trump administration and these family members who say they are serving us on a volunteer basis. No, they are lining their own pockets as frequently as they can. On the surface, the Times has a front-page story in Friday's edition with a deep dive into the kind of spying that is operated by, that is conducted by corporate firms. And many of them hire former Israeli spies. Some of them are based in Israel, and some are based in the Emirates. And it's an interesting, lengthy article that talks about Black Cube, about Psy Group, about Dark Matter, which is the company that is based in the Emirates. And we're told that about $12 billion is being generated annually in this sector, corporate, for-profit spying. And what I find interesting is it's the article on the face of it offers some news and interesting information, but they don't quote or cite the work of a company called Psy Group that in 2016 got involved in an election campaign in a little town in Southern California's Central Valley for a hospital board. And they manipulated social media, created false front groups, tried to slime the do-good opposition. Somehow that didn't make it into the report here from the New York Times. And I believe that there is a very blurry line between these corporate spying operations and the governments that the employees of the corporate spying operations mostly came from. And I have deep concerns that Israel's spy network is operating on a daily basis here in the United States. But of course, we can't talk about that because I would be an anti-Semite if I made accusations like that, even when they are supported by significant factual evidence. Every day I pause for a moment to thank the people who support my work at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. Fine folks like Ethan Knox, Andrew Rush, Brian Mazzy, they each kick in $5 a month. And then there's Andrew Rush. He's got big bucks. He contributes $10 a month. Oh, I got that wrong. Andy Rush, $5 a month. Stuart Russell, he's the money bags with $10 a month. And I appreciate even $1 when people contribute. It's validation of what I do. It helps cover my costs here, and I've got to make a big order for ink cartridges. I do a lot of printing to print out the stories that I grab and then deliver them to you. And so you help cover the costs of my operation. And occasionally, I go and buy a bottle of wine with the extra cash. That's about all it covers. But I'd like to get more money, get more support, and you can do that. Just visit peterbcollins.com. Click on the menu, then click on Become a Subscriber. When you get to the sign-up page, it's an easy choice, $5, $10, $20 a month. The $50 annual subscription earns a bonus book for those in the continental U.S., and right now it is Trump on the Couch by Dr. Justin A. Frank, the D.C. psychiatrist. And, of course, if you prefer to use the U.S. mail to communicate and contribute, my post office box is number 150660. San Rafael, California, 94915. That's Box 150, 660, San Rafael, 94915. Well, they're at it again. I guess the rumors are just building that the Mueller report is going to be delivered to the Attorney General very soon. I don't have anything to confirm that with, and this kind of speculation is based on anonymous leaks and the kind of coverage that has really been the foundation for the Russiagate narrative to date. And in another teaser at the New York Times today, my old buddy Scott Shane is the solo reporter on a lengthy piece, and I didn't have time to read it, called Glimpses of the Mystery That Is the Mueller Investigation. And the opening lines suggest that, the journalists have been struggling to keep up with Mueller, and there's just a whole lot of speculation in the opening paragraphs of this lengthy recap. And if it's anything like what we've seen before, it is used to try to cement the fact-challenged Russia narrative in anticipation of Mueller's report and whatever the findings may be. And in a second tease on the editorial page of the Times today, St. James Comey, the former FBI director, pens an op-ed where he says that I'm not rooting for Mueller to demonstrate that Trump is a criminal. I'm not rooting for Mueller to clear the president. I'm not rooting for anything at all except that the special counsel be permitted to finish his work, charge whatever cases warrant charging, and report on his findings. He says, I have no idea whether my old pal, and he doesn't say that, Bob Mueller, will conclude that Trump knowingly conspired with the Russians. And I don't care. I care only that the work be done well and completely. He says, I do have one hope that I should confess. I hope that Trump is not impeached and removed from office before the end of his term. Now, this is so ridiculous because here's the guy that used to run the vaunted FBI, the nation's national police force, right? And he's saying that he is so fearful of the Trump mobs that he says we shouldn't impeach him. Now, he continues here, I don't mean that Congress shouldn't move ahead with the process of impeachment, and if Congress thinks the provable facts are there. I just hope it doesn't, because if Trump were removed from office by Congress, a significant portion of this country would see this as a coup, and it would drive those people further from the common center of American life, more deeply fracturing our country. Bullshit. This is bullshit. We should not live in fear and be intimidated by those who would consider this to be a coup. And as you know, I don't believe that Mueller has found significant evidence of collusion with Russians that influenced the 2016 election. But he has found obstruction of justice and chargeable crimes that form the basis for impeachment, and failing to act on them, I believe, is a serious breach of constitutional rule in this country. And a claim that, we should beat him in 2020 and that's the only way. They're going to think the election was rigged. The Trump Twitter followers, the people who show up at his campaign appearances, those mob rallies, they will never be persuaded. And it is pointless to try. We must reestablish the rule of law in this country. And ducking impeachment will not achieve that or advance it in any way. So yesterday, carrying out a threat that Trump recently made at the CPAC conference in Washington, where, he spoke for 2 hours and rambled on, his sweat dripping down his face. It was bizarre. Anyway, yesterday, painting campuses as a hotbed of liberal indoctrination, censorship, and coercion, Trump signed an executive order requiring colleges and universities to protect free speech or lose federal funding for research. Now, this is a silly move on his part. He is grandstanding for all those wounded conservatives, provocateurs like Milo Yiannopoulos, who tried to stage an appearance at UC Berkeley and was basically run off the campus. Now, I do not support suppression of speech, even by Milo Yiannopoulos. But these were concocted provocations. And to believe that only right-wingers suffer from suppression of their speech is just totally false. Now, I can't claim to have read every bit of commentary that surfaced since Trump delivered his executive order, but I did watch a discussion on the public television news hour, and I've read a few stories about it today. I haven't seen a single voice say, hey, what about the people on campus who support boycott, divestment, and sanctions aimed at Israel? What about the Palestinian groups that have been silenced through manipulative tactics that were run by the Israel lobby? No, that doesn't draw a mention. The way that pro-Palestinian voices have been squelched, not only on campus, but with the passage of these unconstitutional limitations and sanctions for people who support BDS, corporations that support BDS. We're living in a bizarre world. And to believe that only right-wingers suffer limitations on their free expression is just crazy. Yesterday, as expected, Cesar Sayoc, I think that's how his name is pronounced, the Florida man who lived in his van that was covered with all those stickers that were pro-Trump and anti-Hillary, the guy who mixed up these crude pipe bombs and mailed them to Democratic leaders and CNN and actor Robert De Niro. I mean, it was a laundry list of Trump's opponents. And we're being denied the full evidence of Sayoc and what motivated him, because in pleading guilty, he was permitted to just read a statement to the court, and he apologized, admitted that his actions were wrong, but he offered no further description of his motivation and didn't expound on any political views. And so he pled guilty to 65 counts. Sentencing will follow. It will probably be lengthy. We'll never hear from him again. And this is another case of a hate crime driven by Trump, directly instigated by him. And he's able to wave it off and say, oh, no, just another mad dog with a MAGA hat. Kevin Gostola is providing excellent coverage of the continuing incarceration of Chelsea Manning. As you know, she's been imprisoned for about 2 weeks now after refusing to testify before the grand jury investigating WikiLeaks. And the documents filed with the court show that Manning was concerned that the grand jury investigation was trying to draw her into a perjury trap, because she gave detailed testimony in her own military court-martial years ago about how she, as a single operator without anybody else helping her, transferred quite a bit of information anonymously to WikiLeaks. And now they appear to be reviewing that old testimony before the grand jury, and that is where Manning balked. Her attorney, Moira Meltzer-Cohen, said she's sort of faced with the choice of reiterating her previous answers, which the government appears not to accept, or being untruthful, which she refuses to do. Since her prior testimony made clear that she acted alone, since we've been advised that she is herself not a target in this investigation, it would appear that the government may harbor an interest in undermining her previous testimony, since it doesn't inculpate or, suggest guilt of anyone else who might be a target. So this is a complicated case. I believe Chelsea Manning has taken a strong and principled position, and I think that she is right to suspect that they're trying to entrap her and come up with a way to put her back in prison behind, civilian charges after she was convicted and served years before Obama commuted her sentence under the military justice system. It's like there's a race to the bottom. Mississippi against Missouri. I mean, heck, the states start out with the same first few letters. And yesterday, right-wing Governor Phil Bryant of Mississippi signed one of the most restrictive abortion laws in the country, saying that abortions are banned once a fetal heartbeat can be detected, which is about 6 weeks into a pregnancy, when many women don't even know that they're pregnant yet. And a similar bill with a 6-week restriction, I believe that's the case, has passed, and I don't think it's yet been signed in Missouri. Now, these governors and these legislatures know exactly what they're doing. They are trying to provoke a Supreme Court review of Roe versus Wade by offering increasingly restrictive and cartoonish abortion regulation at the state level. Note the silence of most Democrats. Note that most media organizations, even the ones considered liberal, are not publicly fighting the attempt to choke or eliminate abortion rights in this country. Interesting move by the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, known as the DCCC, in an apparent reaction to the insurgence of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who knocked off a top Democrat, obviously an incumbent, during the primary season last year. So the DCCC is trying to stifle any other primary challenges against incumbent Democrats by cutting off contracts to political advisors and consultants who operate by supporting some incumbents and by supporting some challengers. And so the consultants now have to sign an agreement stipulating that they will not work with anyone challenging an incumbent. This is so grossly anti-democratic, and that's a small d, and it's also anti-democratic with a capital D. These are the times we live in. Garuda Indonesia, the state airline of the nation of Indonesia, is trying to back out of its contract with Boeing. They ordered 49 737 MAX jets. Only one has been delivered so far. And after the crash of the Lion Air in Asia and the crash of the Ethiopian Airlines most recently, they say, we don't want to buy any more of your planes. Our passengers don't trust flying in a MAX anymore. They often ask during booking what type of aircraft they would be flying on. It's bad for business. And Boeing, I think, is facing a really bad stretch here. And, of course, one of their former executives is the acting defense secretary. So they do have friends in high places. In Venezuela, Juan Guaido is screaming his lungs off that his chief of staff, who was arrested Wednesday and locked up by the Maduro government, well, he is protesting this in every way that he can. So the position of the state of Venezuela under the government of Maduro, who is still the president, is we would like to inform the national and international communities that our intelligence services have dismantled a terrorist cell that was planning to carry out a series of targeted attacks. They claim that the supposed cell had hired Colombian and Central American mercenaries to kill political leaders, military officials, Supreme Court judges, and carry out acts of sabotage against public services. Now, we have the recent total shutdown of the electrical grid, which has been blamed on provocateurs. We also have that bizarre incident where Maduro was giving a speech and a drone was flown very close to him with explosives that did not go off. But I have to be fair. This does appear to be retribution, picking up one of the top people in the opposition without grabbing Guaido, kind of testing the waters to see what the U.S. will do, and true to form, Mike Pence, the vice president, issued a vague threat: we will not tolerate Marrero's imprisonment or the intimidation of the legitimate government of Venezuela. That would be Guaido in their dreams. And those responsible will be held accountable. Maduro must release Marrero now. I don't know who Pence thinks he's talking to, or why he thinks this is going to be effective. But those are his words. And to be fair, I do think that Maduro is drifting into gringo lingo by referring to this as a terrorist group. It is political opposition. They are attempting a revolution. Is that terrorism? Well, only if you use the American definition. And I think that's what Maduro is doing here. And finally today, the Sackler family is starting to feel some pain. And maybe they'll reach for some of the OxyContin that their company produced to try to ease the pain a little bit. But massive lawsuits representing communities in 26 states and 8 tribes, they have accused the Sackler family of knowingly breaking laws in order to enrich themselves. Well, I believe that this is a white-collar drug syndicate that is in the process of being brought to account. There are 8 people in the family who've been accused of being the primary cause of the opioid epidemic. And the Sackler family, which has a blue blood image, they have contributed to the Metropolitan Museum and the Guggenheim Museum in New York, and they have seeded money at many Ivy League schools. Just this week, Britain's National Portrait Gallery decided not to take up an offer of a £1 million Sackler family grant. Columbia University and the University of Washington have announced they are not now accepting gifts from the family. So they are being properly ostracized, and it remains to be seen if the courts will hold them financially accountable. For me, the best outcome would be that they grab billions of dollars from the Sacklers and use it to fund drug addiction treatment and rehabilitation for the millions of Americans who are hooked on OxyContin today. Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. You're free to share it with absolutely everyone. You'll find it on YouTube, and I remain Peter B.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.